So today, FSW13, we're going to be learning CSS in JS. This is some really cool stuff, and what we'll be going over today is we'll be learning a library called styled components, which is like one of the up and coming libraries that people are starting to use in React. So what you're learning today is like not advanced stuff, but it's cutting edge technology. That there's a few early adapters that are getting into this technology, and a lot more coming on board. So it's kind of cool that you can come to a place like this and learn cool new technologies. So before we get into that, we'll touch a little bit on React Strap, which is a library that lets us use Bootstrap in our React projects. Real quick though, we'll take a few minutes to kind of review things from yesterday, because I know higher order components are tough. So we'll look at the project briefly, and then this lesson historically goes pretty quickly. So at the end, when we're done going over this stuff, if you feel comfortable with where you're at and ready to jump into the project, you can leave the lecture early and just get started on your project. Otherwise, we'll finish up the lesson with a Q&A, and we can just go over anything that you guys want to talk about and ask about. So let's pull up our project. Okay, so the idea was for yesterday was that we wanted to get our React Instaclone project behind this login form here. So we wanted to have a login form to in some way kind of protect the content that is in our application, so our posts and all that. And it should be noted that this is obviously not a safe way to do logging authentication, but it's kind of a cool way, so you learn a couple different things. So should be able to type in a username and password and click login, and then we see that a user key was added in our local storage. So we're down here in our local storage. And since there is a user key, we have our application. And this was pulled down from the repo, so I don't know what is going on with the, can't get the images. But that's okay. We've got the focus what we want to focus on is this login functionality. If you wanted to create some kind of logout button, then you could go into local storage and delete the key that we have called user. And then if you do that and refresh the page, then it takes you back to the login page. So this is the MVP right here, to be able to kind of go back and forth based on between the post and the login page, based on if we have a user logged in with local storage. So let's take a look at this in the code. All right, so if we look at our index.js, it is rendering our app component, right? So whatever is being exported from our app file, app.js file, is going to be rendered here. So if we take a look at what's being exported from app.js, we see that it's not just app like this, right? This is the normal way that we've seen so far to export a file. But now we're exporting this function call. So now we've got this function that's kind of an intermediate step before we actually export something from this file. We're not necessarily exporting app. So we need to look at our authenticate and see when we invoke this function and pass in app, what is going to be returned by this function call, and whatever is returned by this function call is going to be exported. So we jump into over here to authenticate.js, and we see that we have this authenticate function. Cool. And of course, it's taking in a component right here. So we've passed in our app component. So that gets passed in here. Now let's look at the return. We're concerned about what is this function call returning. In our render, it's returning either app that it's taking in, or it's returning login page that we're importing right here. So it's returning one of the two like this. And which one it returns is all based on this if statement right here. So if we're logged in, then we're going to return app, and that's what we will export here, and that's what will get rendered here. If we're not logged in, if this becomes false and we skip this line, then we return out of this function, we return our login page, and our login page gets exported. So this is kind of a cool pattern, because if you're not logged in, then you're exporting your login page from your app.js file, and none of this code even gets touched at all. So like you've got this component declared here, and it's doing stuff. It's rendering a post page, but it's not even being exported if we're not logged in. So kind of a cool pattern. There are many different ways to accomplish this goal. And so just keep that in mind, that this is a path that you can take to use an HOC to protect our post page content. There are many other ways that we could do this. Maybe you came up with a different way, which would be awesome. Okay, so let's look at our login page then. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. Our login page just returns or builds this form, and which we saw right here. So our login page returns this form that gives us the logged in stuff. And so what happens when we submit our login things? When we type into our inputs with our username and password, what actually happens? We'll scoot this over to the side so we can look at this file for a minute. So when we click on our button, we get this handle login submit function triggered. So we come up here and we're doing a couple different things. So we are grabbing this .state.username. We're grabbing the username from state, and we're setting it to our local storage under user. So our user is just grabbing what's on this .state.username. We're kind of ignoring our password. Maybe in your solution you used password to set your password to the local storage as well, and then you can check username and password and see if they match. So we set that to local storage, and now we do window.location.reload. Why do we need to reload the window here? What do you guys think? Oh, there's the problem with the image links. Cool, thank you. Yes, we need to re-render with our new data. We're not quite starting the well, I guess we are starting the logic over. Yep, because when we refresh the page, we do that. We need to do that for our check. Yeah, so just setting local storage isn't going to trigger a re-render for us. Yeah, recheck for local storage. So where are we checking local storage? Where is this check happening that needs to rerun in order for this project to work? Ah, yes, authenticate. So let's check that out. Okay, so in authenticate, we've got our class, we've got our constructor that's setting up our state. So this.state.loggedin equals false. So we're initializing logged in as false, and then component did mount. So this is what we want to rerun, and that's what we're triggering with window.location.reload. Because when we refresh the page, then authenticate is going to run again and is going to mount again. Well, let's see. So authenticate isn't actually mounting. That's happening right here. So we're returning this class component. If we went X and V, we're exporting this default class right here. So this class, this anonymous class, is re-rendering and rerunning, and it's remounting. So now we can check if local storage has this user item. If it does have the user item, then we set state again and render true, or set state.loggedin to true. And once this set state runs, then we trigger a re-render. So we set that to true, this re-renders, and we return app instead of login page. So by the time it gets to our index.js, we are rendering our where is it, post page rather than our login page inside this app component. Cool, good job, guys. So this is kind of what makes things makes this check happen over again, and that's the important piece right here. Now, next week, we're going to figure out how to go from page to page in our application without needing to refresh the page. So we can route, it's called routing, to different views within our application, and we can trigger this kind of thing without reloading our page. So be excited for next week, because there's a lot of cool stuff coming with that. And it's kind of the first point. Well, with this app, you kind of get like a brief look into, oh, I built kind of a real feeling app. Like this kind of feels, it's got a little bit of functionality to it. This is starting to feel real. Next week is just like chock full of that. So you're actually building some really cool stuff where we're clicking on things and going to a new page and seeing state change based on where we're at. So yeah, next week is a lot of fun. It's a good one to look forward to. Okay. Any questions on this project then? Okay, so could we revisit authenticate and what happens when app is rendered in index.js? Yep, we'll walk through that one more time. Let's see. We're only checking to see if username exists in storage, right? So this is a good question. You could do, I'll answer this question and then we'll walk through this one more time. And then if you have any other questions for this project, then we can go over those in the Q&A after the lecture's done. So we're only checking to see if username exists. How do we check if the actual value on the username exists? So if we wanted to check an actual value, then I would take away this here, and I would actually do something like this. If it does not equal ASDF, then set this to false. So you can, it's just like any, again, this is just JavaScript stuff. Don't let the whole idea of this authenticate higher order component get you confused, because this is just a simple if statement in JavaScript with our compare operators. Good question. Okay, the other question was to revisit authenticate and what happens when app is rendered in index.js. App.js exports authenticate, but index.js imports app, not authenticate. Yes, so this gets into ES6 modules and how we import and export modules. So if we look at our app.js, we are exporting a default something, right? So we're going to export something from this file here. And we're calling this export the default export for this file. What that means is when we import that into our index.js, let's do full one here. When we import that, we are not importing, this app is not the same as this class, okay? We're not exporting this class. We're exporting whatever authenticate returns. So when we import app, it is a little bit deceiving. So let's just say import authenticate return. Okay, whatever our authenticate is returning, we're going to import that and we're going to render that. So we save it, we reload our page, and we still have everything working. So what is the difference there? The difference is that when we have a default export like this, it's going to export something. We're not exporting app. But when we export it as a default, when you import that thing, you can name it whatever you want right here. So we could say import foobar from app, because we get to make up the name here. And then we just have to use, where we want to call this, we just have to use the name that we put up here. So that's a good question. It's a little bit misleading what was going on, and that's just fine. But don't get this app confused with this app right here. We're simply importing the default export from this file. The default export is whatever's being returned out of this render function. So what is being returned, sorry, not not out of this. This whole class actually is being exported or returned right here. So authenticate gets invoked. It returns a class component. And this class component is going to render either app or login page. So if we took this whole thing out, if we just copied it, went into our index page and went like this and class app, we could basically do this. We just have to import our two files here. And then we'd be rendering this whole class. So this is basically what's happening is we're rendering this class inside our index.js. Because that's what's being returned by authenticate. Okay, hopefully that helps out. Yep, perfect. So the other part of this is there are default exports and there are non-default exports, or AKA named exports. So if you look up here on this line, whatever component this is, the React export, whatever is being exported as the default from this package is right here. And we could name, for this one you have to name it React because under the hood it's going to look for this to be called React. So we name it React, and this is the default export from this package. But there's also some named exports. So we put named exports or non-default exports inside brackets like this. And we'll actually get a pretty good look at this and when we jump into our lesson right now about React Bootstrap. So let's do that. Let's segue into React Strap, and we'll see this syntax a little bit more. So let's look at our login page. We have to clear our okay, here we go. So we're going to look at our oh, how did that come unplugged? Haha, it's not going to die anymore. Okay, so let's just look at login page. We're going to close out the rest of this. We don't want to save. And we're going to pop this one to the side there. Okay. So this was built with React Strap with a little bit of Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is just if you haven't used it yet, it's just a styling library that gives us a style sheet. So we can add classes to our HTML elements that we're building our app with, and it applies the styles for us. So Bootstrap is the library. We're going to use another library called React Strap. React Strap. And this is a library that wraps Bootstrap and gives us React components based on Bootstrap components. So we can install this into our project, and we have an entire list of these components that are React components that we can just import and use wherever we want. It's super cool because it just gives us a lot of different options, and we can quickly and easily create cool applications that look good with this kind of a library. So let's look at our project, and you'll notice that we are bringing in quite a few components from this library. So we're importing all of these, and you'll notice they're inside brackets. So these are named exports. These are non-default exports from the React Strap library. To get this, I had to run yarn add React Strap. So let's look at the documentation. So to get started with React Strap, you can add it through npm. Doesn't go through how to add it with yarn, but we know that we can replace npm install with yarn add, and then just React Strap, Strap. And then it also tells you to do React and React DOM, but those come, we already have those in our project because we did create React Strap, or create React app. Ooh, that's hard. Create React app and use React Strap. So we just yarn add React Strap. It installs the library for us. And then there's one more step that we need to do. So here we go, going through the setup, CDN, okay, let's just find it in our, here. So in index.js, we import the style sheet right here. And okay, here it is. Import bootstrap CSS in the index.js file. So we import that, and that gives us access to all the bootstrap styles. Let's look at node modules. So if we go to bootstrap, bootstrap, dist, CSS, and bootstrap min.css right here. So we're importing this CSS file into our index.js. Now with Webpack, you'll notice we're not bringing this into our index.html, right? You'd think we'd have to do something like this. Bring it in as a link, style sheet, and do that there. But because we're using Webpack, and this whole project was put together by Create React App, Webpack is going to take this and add it to the head of inside our index.html for us. And if you don't believe me, I'll prove it right now. So if we go into here and we go to our elements, into our HTML, into our script, let's do a search for bootstrap. Here we go. There's our bootstrap styles right there. Added as a style tag. So that is the minimized bootstrap styling sheet right here. So pretty cool. We talked a little bit about JavaScript tooling fatigue, and this exact situation is why that is a thing. This is where it came from, because you used to have to, you couldn't do something like this before Webpack. We had to do all of this manually in our index HTML and set everything up. And every time we added a new library to our React apps, it was just a headache to get everything set up. So thankfully, the Facebook team built Create React app, and now we can just do things like this, and it's super easy and adds our Bootstrap styles here. Okay, so let's take a look at actually using some of these components. There we go. We've got this in our login page, right? We are importing a button, we're importing a form component, form groups, label, input, and form text. So just like importing one of our custom components, when we import this, we can just jump into our return, our render function, into our JSX, and simply add a button component. So this button you can see is the button for right over here. Let's create another one. Okay, so we're using, notice how this is capitalized and not lowercase, because we're not using the given HTML button tag, we're using our button component imported from React. So let's go look at components, buttons, and let's see what we can do with this component that they give us. All right, so we can see that there is a color prop that is on this button component. So let's add a primary button. Oh, there we go. So this login button is the success, which is that green button. Let's add a color, and we'll say primary. There we go. Now we've got our primary hello button. If we add one more, and let's look at let's see, we've got warning, danger, we've got any of these that we can use. Just by passing in a color, we now have 3 different colored buttons here. So this is the power of something like React, and it's only possible because we have something like React, right? We've been talking this whole time, why do we have React? Why are we using React? Why is React a thing in the world? Because we want to be able to break down our user interface into reusable components to make our lives as developers easier and to make better, faster applications for our users. Well, there's nothing more reusable than this button component right here that we're importing from React. It's rendering some text inside, right? It takes in a prop, and based on what we pass in as that prop, it's going to set a different color for each button. Look, it's even given us a prop types object so that we know what we have access to. We know what we can use pass to our button. For example, active. What if we don't want this to be active? Sorry, not active, disabled. So let's pass a disabled attribute or prop to our button. Now, I don't think we've seen this before. So this is basically doing disabled equals true, but React doesn't like you to do this. So if you want to pass something in, if you have a Boolean type like this disabled, and you want to pass in true, you simply just pass it in like this. You can pass in false. this is how we would make this false, but this is how we pass in true. So we'll save that. We'll look back here, and now I can't click on danger anymore, and we don't get that hand icon for the cursor. If I take that away, the color pops back out and we can click on it. If I add that back in, raise it out, and you can't click on it. What else can we do? We've got color as a string, block. Not sure what that is doing. Maybe this is like inline block. So if we pass that in, then it will, instead of lining up side to side, let's see what it does. Oh, there we go. See, it dropped it down. It now made this button display block. And so it dropped down a line and filled up the entire space. Gonna grab a drink 1 second. That's better. I kind of like this for our login button, actually. So let's add block to our login button. And now if we didn't have these, then it would just be login. That's kind of cool. What else do we have? A tag. So it looks like we can pass in a function or a string. And they've got some notes here to tell us what this is for. Pass in a component to override default button element. So that's kind of cool. You can override their button element with something else if you pass in like a component. So pass in a functional component right there. Then onClick basically just gives us the functionality that we would expect with onClick. And that's really normal to do. You'll see this in styled libraries that if they didn't have this, then we couldn't use, so on custom components like this, you can't just put onClick and run a function because it thinks that you're passing down a prop. So if we did it on an H3, we can do onClick and we can pass in some function. So we can do it on like our normal elements, but we can't go to our app page here. Oh, let's go to authenticate. We can't go to authenticate and do an onClick here on our login page unless we have that as a prop. So these buttons or these event handlers don't work for custom components unless you define them as props inside that custom component. So React Strap define it as a prop, and that's why we can do something like this. And that's common because we expect to be able to do onClick on a button. Size, let's see what size is. So, oh, and this is cool. You can pass outline and make these outlines. So let's find sizes. We can do size large or size small. So if we pass this, size equals large, and then let's do this one, size equals small. Woohoo! And then let's make our login button an outline. So keep those. Cool. So that's just buttons. But you can already see the power that you get with these reusable components. Very easy to customize everything and kind of give it your own feel just because they've extended the functionality so well through this reusable button component. So now let's look at just the list of components, and then we'll jump into our styled components library. So we've got alerts, badges. This new is a badge right here. Breadcrumbs, if you want to do a breadcrumb navigation type system. Button drop downs are really cool. Do some action, another action. Yep, you can go through this whole list and play around with all these different components that you get. So any of these can just be dropped into your JSX, imported and dropped into your JSX. Progress bars. Do they have like loading ones? Animated, here we go. This is kind of a fun one. Do an animated progress bar. So lots and lots and lots to explore and do here. They're really cool. Take a look at this real quick. Woo, lots of things going on. Oh, wow. Yeah, we were, let's see. Guys, we're busy. I didn't know until yesterday, anonymous classes. This looks like it's a good discussion. Thanks for the heads up. Okay, saw that you moved state storage of username and password from app to login. This is not mentioned in the instruction, but a very important piece of the puzzle I wish I was provided to us, or at least hinted. Okay, so we didn't move the state from app to login. What happened was in login, we have state, this.state equals username and password. All this is doing is keeping track of the text that we're typing into the inputs here. The connecting piece is when we click handled login submit, we add a new, we set our username, this.state.username, we add that to local storage. So we're persisting data that will persist through, or we basically got this mini database in local storage that we've added our user to. And then the magic, the connector piece, is reloading the page right here. And the reason we want to reload the page is we're not passing any of our state from here to our app, to our authenticate. We're just adding it to that database. And then our authenticate is going to check that database. But we need to run this window refresh so that our component did mount function runs again. And when we click login and we refresh the page, this will run again, and we're going to determine whether we're logged in or not. So if there's no local storage item called user, then we keep logged in false. If there is a local storage item called user, then we set logged in to true. So this state is just coming from right here. It's not grabbing anything from login.js. It's just happening right here. We're setting our logged in state based on what's in this little mini database right here, our local storage. So this is the connecting piece. There's no way that login and authenticate are communicating. That would be an anti-pattern in React. So that's one thing that they tell us, that the React team says, okay, you shouldn't do things this way. We shouldn't have sibling components talking to each other and passing data back and forth to each other. We have to use little something like local storage, or in 2 weeks we'll look at Redux to see how we can do that better. Or we'd have to pass this state up to a kind of parent component and then down to authenticate. So sorry that was confusing, but yeah, the tie-in piece is this mini database called local storage here. Cool. Glad we could clear that up. All right. Oh, thank you, Zach, for sharing the link there. Does yarn add put the installed module in as a dependency, or do you still have to do -- save? Yarn add will do it. Okay, cool. Good things here. Let's see. I like Bootstrap. Yeah, can be a little bit restrictive. Bootstrap is very opinionated. It likes you to do things your way, and if you want to override it, then you have to do some CSS. Okay. Yep, you absolutely could do this. I think we've got a little bit of time, we can look at something like that. So if inside our render, so every time we type keystroke, right, we're going to run this .set state, which is going to rerun our render. So let's just say const disable button equals, and then we'll do a JavaScript expression here. So we're going to check to see if there's text on both of these. So we're going to say this.state.username. So is there text there? Yeah. Or and. So if there's text here and there's text here, we don't need the parentheses. I just sometimes put it there to remind myself that this is a JavaScript expression that's going to evaluate down to some value. And in this case, since we're using the ampersand, double ampersand, it's going to evaluate down to true or false. So I just do that as a little quick reminder to myself that that's what's going to happen. So now, disable button, we can pass this to disabled. Now if this evaluates to true, that's okay. We just don't want to type in like the actual Boolean value true, but we can have a variable that is that evaluates down to true. So I think I may have done this backwards. Let me save this here. Oh, I have. There we go. Couldn't see that there. Okay, so we did it backwards. So we want the opposite of, we'll call this enable button. No, we'll keep it the opposite of these. Okay, so right now our login button is disabled. We're going to delete those and delete the outline. So I type in there. It did let us through, but that's okay. You get the idea. You can write the correct JavaScript here to make it so that this button is disabled while we don't have any text there. Really good question. And I almost jumped into that explanation earlier when we were talking about disabled. So I'm glad you brought it up, and we could talk about that. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so there are lots of libraries like this. React or Bootstrap is one, just one library, styling library. There's material design is another popular one. You can explore a lot of these. Ooh, that's a good question. So color is, if we look back at our button, so color is expecting one of these strings here. So they set the hex value depending on what kind of button you want. So if you want the secondary button, they set the hex value. If you want the danger button, they set the hex value of red. So this isn't something that we could do. Like let's try and make this white. So yeah, it's not going to let us do that. That's not even one because H isn't an accepted character. We can't do blue. So for this particular prop, we have to use their specific strings here. Oh, I think we had, oh yeah, we did have success. Good question. Ooh, what's an anti-pattern? Bad practice, yep. Okay, awesome. Let's take a look at styled components now, because this is going to be our project for today. If we go to React Instaclone and we look at the day 4 README, today you're going to be adding styled components, this library, to our application. For more motivation behind this approach, watch this. So basically, we're going to replace our CSS, any styling you've done, with styled components. And we'll look at what these are and how to do that. So let's take a look at let's go into our code here and our post container, and let's look at our post header. Okay, and then we also want, we'll stretch this out a little bit. We also want post CSS up here, and we'll break this out to the right. Okay, so what are styled components? Let's just go styled components. Okay, so styled components are a way to create custom components that have all of your CSS styling written in JavaScript inside our component. So that's a little bit confusing. So let's take a look at how we can do this. So first we need to import and add our styled components. So I'm going to open up my terminal and I'm going to say yarn add styled components. Now this one doesn't have a style sheet or anything like that, so we don't need to go into our index.js and add something. We simply need to run that command, And they even tell us that's all you need to do. You're now ready to use it. Yep, no build step. Woohoo! Okay, so let's make our first styled component. So we're going to import styled from styled components. So we'll do that right here. Okay, now remember, this is a default export, so I can name this however I want. I could do capital, I could do lowercase, you could do styled component. Actually, I think you can't. Maybe you can do kebab case there. You could do that. You'd want to spell it correctly though. We'll just do what they suggest, styled. All right, so let's create, let's look at what we have here. So in our project, we're going to log in, and we've got this search area here. So in our CSS, we've got post header. Let's find where our post header is. Okay, there's our post header. All right, post container wrapper. So we're going to, let's change this to a header component, or header element, excuse me, like that. I'm sorry, we have not taken a break yet. So before we jump into the rest of this, let's take a quick little breather because we've been going. So, yep, we'll do 5 minutes and we'll come back to this. All right. Zach saved me, gave me the updated code for our dummy data here. So thank you for that. So now on our project, nice, much better. That's better, much better. Okay. So we are looking at styled components. Where did our, here we go. That one, that one. Okay, so what we're going to do is we've changed this div into a header element, right? Which hasn't done anything yet. What we want to do is we want to create a component now for this element. So we're going to create a new const called header. And let's see how we create this component in using this styled components library. So with the styled import that we're bringing in, we can, it's got a bunch of methods on it that are based on actual HTML elements. So we can do styled.button, we can do styled.div, styled, or for our case, styled.header. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a component called header that is going to return a header HTML element, JSX element to be exact. So this right here is a function is a functional component that's going to return a header component. Now, we're going to do some cool, awesome, tricky ES6 stuff. And we're going to invoke this function like this. We're actually going to use backticks to invoke our function. And this is valid ES6 JavaScript syntax. What's really cool about this is we can, with these template literals right here, we can drop this down and we can invoke this function with some JavaScript inside here. It's so cool. Okay, so styled components uses this cool next level JavaScript cool stuff to make this whole process super simple. So let's look at the button that they're creating. They invoke style.button, and they're just passing in straight up CSS looking, syntax looking stuff, string right here. So just passing in this string. So what does that mean for us? Well, we can take, if we go to post header, we can take everything, all the CSS that's in our post header right here, and get it out of there, delete that, and put it right here. Now, we don't need this class name. We actually don't even need this element because we're going to use our component. We'll save that and we'll take a look at what that does. Look at that, no change. If we take this out and just create our component without any styles and save it, update it. It's still flexing. That's okay. So we're adding our styles to this header here. Let's take a look at the code now inside this project. So our header is inside our search bar wrapper, not image wrapper. Where's this header at? Let's look for it in Redux here, or React. Okay, so our search bar. Oh, this is our post header. I was looking at the search bar header. So our post header right here. That's where we want to be. Let's inspect that. There we go. There's our header. So we have created this header, and it's been given this weird gobbledygook class. But this gobbledygook class is prepended with SC for styled components. So we didn't have to do that. That happens under the hood right here with this. So if we look at this gobbledygook stuff, we can see that our display flex has been added as into our CSS onto this class. So now let's take a look at it in React. Okay, so here we go. So now we've got our component style.header right here that, as we can see, is just simply returning a header JSX header element. So cool. Awesome emojis. Hey, come on, guys. Oh, that's still there. Hey, where's the emojis? Okay, so let's look at, let's take this away because this should now affect, I was looking at the wrong header. So this should now affect our, yep, there we go. Whoop, everything changed. Now if we wanted to do like a background color, then we would say background color is blue. And then we could, you know what, let's do this. We'll move this back over into here. And these this up. There we go. A little bit bigger. There we go. Now we've got our blue background. Pretty awesome stuff. Okay, but that's like, why do the work here when we could just do it in CSS and that would make more sense, right? Well, what if I told you that we could pass props into here and we can make some dynamic CSS stuff start to happen based on what props we pass into our header? That would be cool. Let's check it out. So let's find these icons. We'll just keep going with our header here. Okay, so let's go to styled components and let's look at this right here. So now we've got the same, they've got their same setup that they had up here. But we've got this JavaScript thing going on. So we're inside template string, right? We're inside this these backticks. So we can do $ curly brackets to do some JavaScript stuff, right? So if we go $ brackets and we pass a function into these brackets, we can take props that we pass in here and do something based on those props. So we'll kind of follow suit here. We'll say we'll pass in a primary like this, a primary prop. So if we have props.primary, and this is this double ampersand, this is fancy code for just a short if statement, short ternary statement. But we'll write it out a little bit more clearly here. If we have primary, props.primary, do we have that? Then we're going to invoke another function called CSS, and we're going to say background color is going to be blue. And then we need to go outside of this backtick and we say, or else. So if we have a primary prop, we're going to make the background blue, or else we'll just do nothing and it'll stay green. Oh, looks like we need to bring in a named component from styled components, or named export. Cool, so before we had background color green, but since we passed a primary prop to it, now we have background color blue. So if this was a button, then you could have multiple buttons, and on one you could pass in primary and it would be blue. On the second button, you don't pass in primary and it would be green. So let's take away primary and we have green. Or let's say we want to do something different here if we don't pass it in. So we'll just pass in, we'll take this out of here and we'll put it right here. Okay, so let's see if we can make this a little bit more legible. So we're going to drop that down, bring this up, drop that down, and drop this down. Okay. Is it not? That's okay. So if we have, props.primary, if this is true, we'll do blue, or else we'll do green. There we go. Awesome. So this is where you start to see the real power of styled components. And this is just a little piece of it. It gets even cooler, if that's even possible. So let's look at something like, let's go to documentation, and let's look at, we just looked at passing props, adapting based on props, we did that, styling any components, extending styles. Except that link doesn't work. There we go. Okay, check this out. We're going, in the documentation, they have created a button component with these styles, right? So you can just drop this button in somewhere and you get this button posted. Now a new component is being created based on button, but with some extended styling. So we create a new component and we pass in this component into this function, and it's going to return this component over here. So what is that pattern called? If we have a component being passed into a function and being returned as a component, whoa! HOCs! Nice, thank you, Patrick. So cool. Here is a real live example that you can look at with your eyes where we have a higher order component happening. Now look, so we've created these two components. We've got button and we've got tomato button. Look how simple, look how easy it is to go into the render function and know exactly what's going on inside this component. Okay, remember I talked about earlier this week how if you want to know what's happening inside a React component, the first place you should look is the render. So with this awesome library, we can go into the render function and we say, okay, I know what this button component is because I just built it up here. So I know I'm rendering a button. I know what tomato button is, and that's all that this component is in charge of doing. So imagine this if you took all these buttons out and put them into their own file, you could just import them throughout your entire app and have all kinds of buttons that are as easy as this to drop into your application. And you can do this for inputs, you can do this for forms, you can do this for headers, header text, all of those things. That's awesome. So you can build out your own style library. You can build out your own Bootstrap very simply with styled components, and just creating your own components and adding some styles to them, maybe extending styling to other components that you're building. And this can all be done super easily. And then you just import and drop in. Plug and play is what we say. Plug and play. Okay, cool. Any questions on that? All right. Are there instances where you'd want to use a CSS file instead of style components? That's a good question, and it kind of depends on what you want to do. Is your goal to take all of your styling out so that you only have JavaScript? And is there an advantage to that? So if that is your goal, then just create everything in a styled component. If your goal is to use this kind of as a tool to make buttons, if you just want buttons as styled components, then you would do CSS files outside of that for the rest of your app. So yep, it just depends on your preference and your goals for that specific project. So are these styles component level? Can I make a tomato button in another component? Yeah, so you absolutely can define this. So if I don't export this header and I go into like login, I can't just drop header in right here, right? This file has no clue what header is. I would have to export it from here and import it into login. So absolutely, you can absolutely do that. Imagine you can use keyframes. Yep, there's woohoo, animations. Okay, sounded like there was some questions. Cool. Up higher. Okay. All right. What if you use it for an input or button that have built-in props for those? Okay, we talked about props. Does primary mean something, or is it foobar? It's foobar. So you can name that whatever you want. The only thing is, whatever you name it up here, you have to pass it in here if you want it to work, right? So this is just like if we had a prop called name that we were passing in as a string. We get to name this prop, and then it goes to this component on the props object. Really good question, because that can definitely get confusing. Oh, yeah. Okay, so if anywhere you have JSX being returned, there are a number of valid JSX things that you can return. You can return a component like we're doing here. You can return, that's a component. You can return, those are components. So before, remember we were returning just a div. So you can return a component, you can return any HTML element, you can return an array of things. Right? So now we're returning an array of things here. You can also, it is also valid to just return null. So this is a valid thing in React, in JSX. So you can see there's nothing there. It will render nothing. So with that in mind, when we look at this, we're creating a component, and we've got a little bit of stuff happening here. So we can say we're just going to return null out of this. And just like down here where it didn't break, it just returned, nothing, then this won't do anything to our app. Right, so it's blue because we've got primary. If we take primary out, then it now hits this null, and it doesn't add a background color. That's a really good question. Okay, let's see. Oh, let's see. So what was your question, Brian? I don't remember what your first question was. React props attributes. Type, so if we did type like this, then since this isn't a normal HTML element like a div, we would have to have something up here, props.type. Class, you would have to have props.class. Although I think JSX may complain at that. I'm not sure. Yeah, so it doesn't like us doing that. But type. Okay, so type works. Class, it really has JSX does not let you do class. But other normal ones, like type, you can pass through, but it's not doing what the normal type would do, like on an input type. Here, you have to actually define it in your component as a prop, and then build out that functionality. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit better. Okay. Okay, yep, if you wanted, if you didn't want this to be an input, then or a header, you do input. We could do a div, we could do an H1, we could do a section. Any valid HTML element tag is a valid method right here. If you wanted a button, if you wanted to create a bunch of buttons, then that's how you would do it there. Okay, good questions. Yeah, sorry I didn't understand at first. All right, we are going to look at our project for today. So we're going to be on number 4, day 4. I saw someone typing. If you have a question, you can go ahead and ask. Day 4. This is kind of a fun day. This is relaxed. This is this is more than, or this is less than what you've seen this week. You know, I just want you to take this new cool library and have fun with this. You guys now have the knowledge. You know what's going on with all of these because of what we've been through this week. To really get into this and have some fun with styled components. Even if writing CSS in JavaScript like this is not your thing, if you'd rather separate your concerns and have JavaScript in one file and CSS in another file, that's fine. This is a good chance for you to look at different ways that people are doing things and look at some new really exciting tech, or what a lot of people is considering new and exciting technology. There's a good chance that that companies that hire you are using styled components. So let's take a look. We've got our task. So by now you should have been working on laying out your application, adding functionality, and building out a login system. Oh, that's a good question. So I think the driving factor is that, and I want to answer this question before we jump into our project, because it's relevant to styled components, which we've been talking about. So I think the driving factor is React gave us this idea of, and made popular the idea of JSX, writing HTML inside our JavaScript. And so I'm sure at some point someone was like, well, if I can do JSX in JavaScript, which I love to do, why can't I do CSS in JavaScript? So you'll notice that there is, so I think that's kind of the driving factor behind the idea that this is gaining popularity, because React devs just love doing everything in JavaScript. That's one of the biggest draws for JavaScript developers to React, is that everything is done in React except CSS. So now we've got even CSS happening in React, or in JavaScript. So I won't jump too much further into that, because there is this YouTube video right here that you can watch. This was put together by Max Stoiber, who built the styled components library. So this is, co-founder and CTO. So this guy, he's pretty young, built out styled components and introduces it here and talks about the motivation behind styled components. So look for that link in your README. Okay, we've got our login system working. We're going to be adding styled components to our application. And here are your tasks. So we basically want to take out all of our CSS today. So that's it for today. Remove your CSS and put your CSS into styled components. So start with, except for where you need to reference your icon class names. Yep, so watch out for that exception there. So refactor your search bar to use styled components. We started doing this on the posts with the post headers. So you'll use styled component.header, and you'll just go kind of left to right inside your header to change out your styles. Then you'll do styled component.div for logo header. You'll do styled component.image for the logo image, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see. So all of that is just talking about kind of the same stuff. Move on to post container and build out styled components. Move on to comment section and get rid of CSS and build out styled components. Let's see. Okay, then at the end of the day, when you're done with this, I want you to take this seriously. Take the time to take a step back and look at what you have accomplished this week. So try and think back to day one, Monday. What were we doing in React? How did you build this out? What were the objectives day one on Monday? And how have you grown through the week, through your adversity to today? And this is going to be kind of cool because I think you guys will see how far you've come in just these 4 short days. So just like our song, I know it's stressful. I know it's been a tough week. Every single cohort that comes through React really struggles these first 2 weeks. And that's because this is hard advanced stuff. So it's always good to take a look back and see what you've accomplished and recognize the growth that you have gone through by facing the trials and adversity that you faced these last 2 weeks. So read through this, take this seriously because it can be a really good motivator as you continue to learn hard things. And then read this article about state-driven views and come up with this short paragraph as to why you feel that state-driven views are important, and then send that paragraph to your PM. Cool. Stretch today is to add the functionality to select a single post. If you click on a post, go to a new page, use React Router to go to a new page and show only that post. Okay, any questions on the homework? Oh, let's take a look. Yeah, look at that. CSS dash blah, blah, blah. Oh, interesting. I have no idea how the Lambda website was built, but it looks like it's something similar to what we learned today. That's cool. Okay, awesome. We've got 15 extra minutes, so I would love to, if anybody's got a question or anything, if you want to, feel free to jump out of here and get going on your assignment. And if anybody's got any other questions, then I'd be happy to stick around for the next 20 or so minutes and review something that you are having problems with. Yes. Patrick, talk to your PM, and then I can help get you to a good point before you jump into style components. That's a good point. This is also, maybe a few of you are not to the point that where you've got the login working. So that would be a good thing to work on today to finish other problems that you have today. But yeah, we want you to have that working. This part of your Lambda experience is we're more focused on form and functionality over form. So we're not as concerned with styled components, with styling and stuff, as we are with getting things functional. Yep, I will do that. I'll have to move this into a code sandbox for you, which I can do. got that song stuck in my head now. Okay, so in the example, const header equals styled dot header, which part is referring to header tag so it knows what to style? Is it the variable name or the part after style? That's a good question. So let's go back into there, posts header. Okay, so if we want to create, let's just go down here underneath everything. And if we want to create a component called some component, then we would do this, right? We would do something like that. Or we could, so we're setting a variable name, and we are setting this variable equal to a function. So if we wanted to use this somewhere in our HTML, in our JSX, we would refer to the variable name right here. Right? So this is how we would make a component. So just like this pattern, we have our variable is going to be used down here, and we're setting our variable equal to a function. So up here, we're setting our variable equal to this stuff up here. So this down here, this function is a functional component. So we're setting, we could do a class component here. So I shouldn't say we set this equal to a function, because this this is actually set equal to a component. So up here, when we do style.something and then use this crazy syntax, this is going to return a component to this variable. So this component is returned, and we get a component built out of it. The header part over here is we have to use one of our normal HTML elements right here. So if we do style.header, it's going to give us, if we look at the element, it's going to give us an actual header in our HTML. If we were to change this into a div, which we can do, oh, it doesn't like that. Probably because of all this. So if we change this to style.div and then inspect it, now it's been changed into a div. If we change this into style.section and then inspect, now we have a section. So this part after the style.whatever is going to be the actual HTML element that we're trying to create. So you can do an image, you can do h4, you can do an a tag, whatever element you have down here, we're going to put up here like this. Then this creates a component, and that's saved to our variable, which gets passed in here. So let's look at, let's break this out to the right again. And let's do this. Let's create a, this will be real quick, and then I'll look to see if there's other comments or questions. Post thumb wrapper. So we'll call this post thumb wrapper equals style.div, because this is on a div tag, right? And we're going to do our backticks. Then we're going to come to post thumb wrapper and make sure this is the only place that it's in our, that it's getting styles from. Put those there. delete this whole thing. And we will replace this. So what are we going to replace this with? We can get rid of our class name. What are we going to replace this div with right here? Post unwrapper, exactly. Oh. There we go. And there we go. Okay, so I like your question. What? Non-second goal class names, yeah. What about pseudo selectors or hover? Okay, so let's go into here and let's see. We've got media templates, so you can do @media stuff, which is really cool. Bring to other components, server side, tag template literals, existing CSS. Let's see, refs. No, because that's going to be adapting based on props. If they have hover listed anywhere. I'm searching for it because I actually don't know how to handle this in styled components. Oh, you saw hover. Ah, where? It was in refs? Okay. Let's see, hover to focus. Oh, that's because it's using on mouse enter rather than the hover pseudo class. Yeah, I'm going to do a quick search on it. Yeah, you should be able to just do this in your CSS. Let's make sure. So let's do and hover and color. Let's do purple. Jupiter. There we go. There it is. Yep. So just pseudo selectors are a lot like less or sass. Thank you, Tom. I was way overcomplicating that. Cool. Any other questions? Nice. I'm going to drop a link. This is done just on locally, so we could go through the iTerm and look at adding packages. So I don't have a code sandbox yet. Okay, so Sai, if hopefully that's pronounced correctly, if you want to use style component styling in the class component and you want to have a conditional styling according to the props properties passed into the class component, how do we reference props of this class? Oh, so yeah, that's a good question. And if we're in a class component like this, and we had a styled component here, so let's say we had our header inside here, and And in this class we're passed like this.props.header message. So we would simply just do header or header color. So we'll do like background color equals this.props dot header color. Then in your component here, it would still just be called props. So inside your class component, you have to refer to the value of it as this.props, but you're just passing color, right? You're no longer using this.props. You're just passing this value to color. So in your component itself, you could say props.color. Because this is not a class component. Header itself is not a class component. It is a functional component, and it's a child of a class component, but that doesn't really matter. If we pass color to a functional component, then we just simply refer to it as props.color. How would you style a placeholder? Would it be the same CSS using, yep, that would be the same that you would do there. Okay, what is in this week's sprint challenge? What's it going to be like? Seems like a lot to fit into 3 hours. I believe that the sprint challenge is, for this week, is redoing the Lambda times project, but in React. So it's a challenge, but it's definitely doable, and gives us a really good view of where you guys are at through these first 2 weeks. Again, yikes, but cool. So again, these first 2 weeks are tough, and I know that there's been frustrations, and there's been some people that maybe your morale has gotten a little bit low these last 2 weeks. I want you guys to know that this is something that happens with every single cohort that comes through this class. And all the cohorts that came before I started teaching, and the couple cohorts now that have come through with me teaching, everybody goes through this kind of dip as we start React Week, because this is hard stuff. I mean, it's crazy that someone who has known JavaScript for 5 weeks is learning advanced React topics in a day. So it is hard, but this is definitely going to be doable if you're at the point that we're hoping you're at, and that we want you to be at by the end of this week. If you're not at that point, then we will help you and help you get to that point before you need to move on to newer stuff. So there's no point if these 2 weeks if you haven't understood everything these 2 weeks, there's no point moving on to the next week and learning new stuff. So we'll help you catch back up and get you to a point that you can complete this sprint challenge. And that's not a bad thing. So don't feel too stressed about it. We will get you to where you need to be. I think you guys have seen all the announcements that get dropped from our awesome executive team, Austin and Ben. I think you guys know that they are very, very dedicated to your success, to the point that if after finishing this course and Lambda Next course, you haven't gotten a job, Austin himself, the CEO, is going to stop everything he's doing, and he will go hand in hand with you, side by side with you, on your job search, and you will get a job. So we are all here to help you succeed. So never fear, don't worry, be happy, and we'll make it through these tough weeks. Okay, guys, I think that looks like it's it for our questions. Appreciate you guys and what you're going through, and please let me know if there's any way I can help you guys out. Yeah, Linda, if you've got questions on that, reach out to me, reach out to your PM. Okay, thanks, guys. I'll field the rest of these questions on Slack here. Have a great day.